Well, today I'm really pleased to say that uh, I've got someone who's on the same time zone for me, which is very rare for somebody living in Perth. Um, we at Guerrilla Cricket, I think it's fair to say that there's a good deal of storytelling that goes on, and not all of that has a very close connection to the truth. But that's okay. It's part of the fun of the thing. But our guest today is someone who is a storyteller by profession these days, and a very good one, both in cricket and tennis, and maybe elsewhere. I'm not sure. He is Anindya Dutta, and he joins us today from Singapore. Thank you for being with us today, Anindya.
Thank you, Mrs. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and it's always a pleasure talking to our listeners. So very happy to be here.
Thank you. So what we're endeavoring to do is just give our listeners a little more background around those of us that are here on air, but don't hear talking about much other than the cricket itself. So I'd like to ask you, if I can, where your first connection with sport came from, the young Anindya, and indeed with cricket as you were growing up.
It came actually when I was about, I guess, about 7. I don't remember much before that, but I do remember that because it's always been a special occasion, and it's something that has meant a lot to me over the years. My dad taking me to see my first test match at the Eden Gardens.
Oh, wow.
And it was one hell of a test match. 1974, West Indies versus India. Viv Richards making his debut in that series. It was amazing. Clive Lloyd's team, really strong team, and the Indian team with all the spinners in it. Tiger Pataudi being called back for that series because, and of course, all this I figured out later, but Ajit Wadekar, who'd won India the first series in England, first series in West Indies, had over the next 2 years lost everything. So he was sacked in 1974, and Tiger Pataudi was brought back as captain. So it was a momentous occasion, and that test match, India won. I mean, completely out of, I guess, out of all expectations on New Year's Day. And in those days, they used to play over, New Year's Eve to New Year's Day. The last day of the match was on New Year's Day.
Wow.
And India came back on New Year's Day, the spinners running through the top order, and India won. And that was the first time I watched Bishan Bedi bowl, first time I watched Chandrasekhar bowl, and it was love at first sight.
Oh, what an introduction. So did you grow up in Kolkata?
I hesitate to say I grew up in Kolkata, but I was there until I was about 10 years old.
Yep.
And then my dad kept getting posted to different parts of India because he was sort of the fix-it man. He used to work for Dunlop Tires, and he was sort of the fix-it man. Wherever there was a problem to be fixed, they sent him for 2 years until it got fixed, and then they took him somewhere else where a problem needed to be fixed. So I went to 8 schools growing up.
Wow.
I came back to Kolkata for my college, my final year of school, and then college. So that's my association. And then I went off to the US after that. So that's I'm not really a Kolkata man from that perspective.
Right. But was cricket even then at the heart of every Indian community?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Winter was all cricket.
Yep.
Eden Gardens was magical. Going to a cricket match was not always about the cricket. It was about it was about having more boiled eggs than I was actually allowed to ever have at home. It was having winter oranges. You could get oranges only in winter at that point in time in India. It was about having a picnic with family. That's what cricket was about. So that's what made it even more memorable, I think.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, because so many of the people to whom I've spoken have talked about their memories of cricket, early memories of cricket, being around friends and family in particular, going to their dad for the first Test match or whatever it might be, and it stayed with them. Tony Bishop said,
buying a new cap.
Yeah. Or Tony Bishop said if he could have one day back, it would be going to his first Test match with his dad. It's that special. And to hear you talk about the inspiration that it's brought to you, that's obviously stayed with you your whole life.
Yeah, and another thing I remember from that first Test match was I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was Andy Roberts' first debut series as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so Roberts at that time was a young, raw fast bowler, right?
Yes.
He was always a deadly fast bowler, but it was just, I had never seen raw pace like that before. And so I remember turning to my dad, and I think I wrote a piece later about this, turning to my dad and saying, "Wow, he's fast," right? And my dad said, "You should have seen Wes Hall."
Yeah.
So yeah, I just remember that very well. Yeah,
it's amazing. It's funny you should talk about Tata Patani too, because although I grew up a very long way away in Sussex, one of my early memories in the early 60s was going to Hove to watch a game, and it started late because of the weather. And
surely you're too young. You're too young for Hedley Verity.
Just a little, and Morris Tate. But Tiger Patani was playing for Sussex at the time.
Wow. Okay.
And he and Colin Bland put on a fielding display while we were waiting for the match. It was extraordinary. For a man with one eye, he was extraordinarily accurate, and he was magic to watch when he was in full flow too.
Yeah.
So as you grew up, you went to college in the States, you said.
I went to college in Kolkata, Presidency College in Kolkata, and then I went to the States to do a PhD. I never got to do the PhD because I figured I would be rubbish as an academic. I'd be bored out of my mind. So I did my master's, did an MBA, and then came back and I became a banker. So
yeah, well, each of us has to earn a living somehow, I suppose.
Yeah.
Tennis, of course, has been a big part of your life as well. Were you a tennis player at the same time as being a cricket player?
I wasn't when I was very young.
Yeah.
I did watch a lot of tennis because my father, well, he liked tennis and he was a member of the Saturday Club in Calcutta, and the Davis Cup was played in Calcutta or Kolkata. So I remember going to watch a few matches when I was young, and then the love for tennis actually came when we moved to Madras when I was about 10. That was the first move that we made, and India versus Australia, the Davis Cup was happening at the club premises where we were members. And that was Vijay Amritaraj. That's the first time I met Vijay Amritaraj, and it's another story because I think about 4 or 5 years ago, I met Vijay in Singapore through a common friend who he was a business partner with.
Yeah,
and this guy just called me up and said, you always wanted to meet Vijay. We just finished our meetings. Can you be here in the next hour? I said, yeah, sure. So I took a detour, Singapore being as small as it is, came home, picked up my autograph book, and went there. Not because I wanted an autograph from him, but the moment I met Vijay, I opened my autograph book. That was my first autograph book, and it had Vijay's autograph, right? He was just blown away. I mean, he was like, "You've kept that book," and I was like, "Yeah." I mean, it's one of the first set of autographs that I ever got. So that was my first love of tennis. Now I play, but I started playing with final year of school, I think.
Right. So were you any good at tennis or cricket?
I was rubbish, but I'm getting better at tennis now with practice, I have to say. And cricket, I played at the corporate level, but other than that, nothing higher than that.
At the corporate level is an interesting expression. So it was part of being employed. In fact,
Yeah, I was playing for the bank in corporate tournaments.
right, right.
Yeah.
And what was your specialty?
Spin bowler.
Right, of course. Leg off.
I started as a leggy. I didn't make it to my college team because I didn't have a googly, and became an offie thereafter.
Oh, it's amazing how many gorillas seem to have started off as leg spinners. I certainly started, but I discovered that at the level of cricket I played, leg spinners weren't given a lot of opportunity. It was sort of unless you could pitch it 5 times out of 6, you were likely to be dispatched into the bushes very quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. Not an easy gig.
Yeah.
Being a leg spinner.
No. So when you were at university in the US, did you get to come across any cricket over there at all? Or
I was completely out of touch with cricket for 4 years because there was Cricinfo hadn't been invented yet.
Yes,
So people can imagine that was very difficult to access. There was no internet. I know it's difficult to believe for young listeners, but there was no internet. I come from that age.
Well, a mobile phone was a phone with a long cord in those days, wasn't it?
Exactly. The longer the cord, the more mobile you were.
Yeah, exactly. So you've continued to, when you came back into the banking world, you continued to follow cricket, I take it, as much as you could.
Of course.
And tell me, apart from your very first test match with your dad, what's the most memorable test match you can recall attending?
It's actually, funnily enough, it's a one-day international, and it's a one-day international which India lost. So this was again in Calcutta. I think this was probably during my college days, if I'm not mistaken, early first year of college, something like that. India, Pakistan. Krish Srikanth, who was a delight to watch at any point in time, opening the innings, hit a blistering 100. I think he was 121 or something like that, which in those days was not common because you're talking about a 220, 230 average score.
Yes.
You didn't have openers scoring centuries too many times. So he scored 100, and India had a very nice score. I don't remember what it was, 275, 280, something like that. And so at lunchtime, we were super happy. I remember going there with my sister and friends, and we were like all celebrating that, we've won this one, right? And then the Pakistan starts batting, and they start losing a few wickets. And then in the end, I think it was Manzoor Ilahi and Salim Malik probably, and they just slaughtered the Indian bowling and won the match. And it's just one of those days where you start off with a lot of expectations, but you thoroughly enjoy the cricket even when India loses to Pakistan. So I remember that one.
That is the beauty of cricket, is it not? That it's not all about winning. The experience is often enough. So you, after your banking career, I think moved to writing about cricket, did you not?
I actually started writing while I was still in banking. So I started writing not so long ago. Started writing on cricket not so long ago. So I'd say maybe 7 years ago. Literally, I wrote an article on an Aussie site because
The Roar, by any chance?
The Roar, it was The Roar indeed.
A lot of our Australian friends have had some sort of introduction to cricket through The Roar. It's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, because I think it's a very good platform. I honestly think it used to be an even better platform when Spiro Zavos and his sons ran it. But it's one of a kind, peer-reviewed platform, which is the best for any writer starting off. Because first, a lot of people read your articles, whoever you are, whether you're a novice or whatever. More importantly, those readers are not anonymous. So they are giving you feedback constantly. And that's the only way to improve, right? So that's where I started. And I met Kersi Meher Homji, the Australian/Indian writer, if you like. And because Kersi read one of my articles, wrote to the editor and asked for my email address. and then wrote to me and said how much he liked my writing, and then we've just become lifelong friends since then. And he's been my mentor um, since
That's
then. So that's how my writing started.
It's amazing how those things come through some sort of synchronicity that you never plan. It's just putting yourself out there, and it happens. So the cricket writing, has that taken you to unexpected places in itself to do with cricket?
It has indeed, because, again, just to complete the story with Kersey, I think the second or third article I wrote was on bowling spells. And so he wrote an email to me which said, there's a book in this. And this was a 500-word article, something like that. And I wrote back to him and said, look, this is a 500-word article. I wouldn't even know how to begin writing a book. I've never written one. I don't know how to write one. And he wrote back and saying, I've written 14 and I'm telling you there's a book in it. Right. So then I wrote back to him, and this conversation goes on over 2 days. And I wrote back to him, says, okay, then tell me how you write a book, because I honestly haven't a clue. Yeah. And he actually told me how he goes about it and said, you'll have to find your own way, but that's how I go about it. Yeah. And then I found my own way, and that's how I wrote my first book. And then it's sort of, it met with much more love than I thought it would. There was a huge amount of research in spellbinding spells. The book, it was the first book ever written on single bowling spells.
Yes.
And I don't think there's been another since then. It was crazy research, because I was picking up 19th century matches of which there were no written records except the scorecard, and I was doing literally a running commentary on the scorecard, because that's how I wrote the book. It's in present continuous. It was an experiment. So I had nothing to lose, right? Yeah. So that's how it started, and then I've written a few more, and with one of the publishers really liked spellbinding spells, so they gave me a commission to write Wizards, the story of Indian spin bowling. And then when that did well, they wanted me to write on the story of Indian tennis, which is how Advantage India came about, and that's how it's gone.
So I must say that when I was speaking to Hendo, he said one of the reasons that he wrote a book was about cricket was partly to enjoy it, but partly to get some notoriety. But he said one of the reasons he's probably not going to write another book is there's a lot of work in it, but there's bugger all money to be made in it. I was thinking maybe
you don't get rich writing a cricket book, I can tell you that.
But I was thinking maybe with an Indian audience as a base, you've possibly got a bigger base to draw upon in terms of an audience.
Theoretically, yes. How many of them actually buy and read books? My articles are, I would imagine, much more widely read, just because attention spans are shorter. Whoever's read the books have thankfully appreciated them, but they keep. I guess the other thing is that when you write the story or the history of a certain aspect of a sport, it's not a static book. So it's not about one incident, which means that over time, it keeps getting sold as more and more people come to know about it and want to read it. Yes. So Wizards, for example, has been in the top 3 on Amazon India for, I think, the last month, after having been off it for 3 months. So you never know with these things, and they stay on the shelf.
It's gratifying. And do you build a rapport with the readers themselves sometimes?
Yeah, I think I do, actually. A lot of them have reached out to me on Twitter, on LinkedIn. These are the two major platforms on which they reach out. I engage with them because I enjoy doing so. Yeah. They like the fact that I tell stories more than just write dry facts.
Yes.
And that's what I intend to do. So especially I really enjoy young readers, because I think young readers reading cricket history, which is what I primarily write on, is such a heartening thing.
Yes.
For the future of the game.
Yeah. So I mean that brings us very neatly to you being a part of the team with Guerrilla Cricket. The fact that it's not just about facts; it's about and not even just about description. It's about engagement. How did you come to be connected with guerrilla cricket in the first instance?
You know what? I'm struggling to remember that, but I think it might have been through Anisha.
Yep.
She's everywhere, right?
She is.
So I think I might have got introduced to Annie on Twitter, and then she might have introduced me to Tony Bishop, and that's how it sort of came together. And the first time, I tuned into guerrilla cricket, I really enjoyed the way it was done and the irreverence of it all, and the fact that the fan engagement was there, which sort of reminded me of the Roar,
Yes,
but in real time.
Yes, yeah. I
So,
think that's the beauty of it. I mean, it's not as if there aren't some good broadcasters out there doing their own thing, but to be part of it was what drew me in. To feel like I was sitting in the same room as part of that conversation through my tweets. And I used to get angry sometimes because my tweet wasn't read out for 15 minutes, so that the conversation had moved on. That's how engaging it was for me. So I know exactly what you mean. And there, particularly, I live by myself. I feel like I've got another family watching the cricket with me. That's the beauty.
Yeah, and you clearly, I mean, if going by the guerrilla cricket WhatsApp group, you clearly don't sleep.
Oh no, not much. Well, put it this way: I living by myself, I have discovered that I actually can do what the hell I like in terms of sleeping hours. The only demand I have is from the dogs and the ducks as to getting fed at the appropriate time. Other than that, I can do what I like. But my sleeping hours are often dominated by the hours of the current test match. That's the truth of the matter. So a couple of things then. You don't have to answer this. Your best performance on the cricket field.
Best performance on the cricket field. I think it was in a corporate match. I've never been much of a batsman.
Yeah.
I much preferred. I mean, you can tell with my obsession with bowling that I much preferred bowling.
Yeah.
And I much prefer bowlers. It was funny because when VVS Lakshman wrote the forward for Spellbinding Spells, the reason he gave me why it took him something like a minute to agree to write it. I didn't even know him. I mean, we just got introduced, and he told me just very quickly, tell me what it is about. And I told him, in a few minutes what it was about, and he said, "I'll do it." And so I asked him later when I came to know him better that he now is a part of my venture in the work that I do. And I asked him later that what made you decide to write that. He said it was just very easy. Everybody writes about batsmen. I really appreciate people who take the pain to write about bowling, because if we didn't get 20 wickets, we would never win matches. So,
Yes.
that's a batsman speaking, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, tell that to
England.
So
just to answer you finally with that background, is there was a corporate match where I hit 2 successive sixes over square leg, and I remember that very, very fondly indeed.
It's that, those sweet moments. Like I was never good at golf, but every now and then that perfect shot that landed exactly where I intended it to go, possibly even a little further. That sweetness it stays with you for a very long time, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Your favorite guerrilla jingles?
Oh, this I should have prepared for.
I like to catch people off guard.
I think it's the Jimmy one.
Yeah.
I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's got a very Indian bent.
It is an Indian
tune,
of course. Right? Yes. It is an Indian tune. It's an Indian film song.
And about a very great man as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So finally, then, your favorite cricketers of all time?
All time. Okay, cricketer who I never watched play, I would say Headley Verity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just simply, blown away with stories of what he did and what kind of a man he was, and how he lost his life. So it's something that I've written a few times about, and I really admire him. Don Bradman, of course. I mean, I wish I could have seen him bat, but at least there are some clips of him in batting.
And the favorite ones you actually saw?
Well, the favorite ones I actually saw, I would say Sunil Gavaskar. I really enjoyed watching, when I was growing up. I loved watching Saurav Ganguly play on the offside. There's just something about left-handers playing cover drives, which is just exquisite.
Well, I don't think it has to be a left-hander, though, does it? I mean,
I think there's some special elegance to it. I've discussed this with David Gower, and he doesn't understand it either.
I don't, because I mean, I was
assumes.
just thinking of David Gower and Damien Martin, and just the grace of what they do. I would have thought that'd be right or left-handers.
Yeah, but I don't know why. There's something about left-handers cover driving, which gets me every time. And in terms of bowlers, I guess it would be the Indian spinners, the spinners that I grew up with, Bhagwat Chandrasekhar, Bishan Bedi, Erapalli Prasanna, these three.
How many of those three are in your book on the spells?
On the spells, I don't think any of them are in the spells, because my spells are very specific. They are single bowling spells. But in Wizards, every Indian spinner who has ever played for India is featured in Wizards. So they're all there. But I'm just blessed. Something that you asked me some time back. I'm just blessed because of the writing. That I've just been able to meet so many of these players that I grew up, and most of them are lovely people. That's when you discover that they're human beings behind the players that you always admired on the field. So cricket's been a lovely journey.
It is, and I mean that's a really good point to finish on, really, because it's like commentators themselves. Only hear one dimension of them, but connecting with people like this brings out the beauty of all the people I've spoken to, and I've just had such a lovely time talking with them. I just want to say thank you to you, Anindya, for what you've brought, not simply through your writing, but through your presence in guerrilla cricket, bringing the joy of cricket with you, because that's what it's about, isn't it?
Thank you so much.
It's the joy and the fun. So thank you.
And I say the same about you. So it's an absolute pleasure every time talking to you today, but also being on guerrilla cricket with you every time. I look forward to the slots when we are together. It's always fun.
Back at you. Thank you so much for being with us today, Anindya. That's been terrific.
Thanks, likewise.